just a little bit with the hips. You're gonna rotate your body towards the forward leg. Hey guys, today we're gonna do an awesome hip stretch. And I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time in a seated position just because of the way our world is set up. So this is a great exercise to start to undo that chronic flexion of the hips that we sit in all day before we go into our other movements, so we can have more balance in our bodies, in our joints, and specifically in our hips and our low back.
And this is such a great exercise or drill or stretch or whatever you want to call it to do, because this is something so easy to do at your desk while watching your kids' sports games, while cooking your eggs in the morning or waiting for your coffee. This is just so easy to do that there's really no excuse to bust this one out for at least a couple reps a day.
Exactly. And it's pretty simple. The same principles apply that we want to make sure we're getting hip extension and not extension in our low back.
Shocked.
I know, we really just change it up here a lot. No, just kidding, it's all pretty similar stuff. So, variations on good solid V's. So, you're gonna come into a half kneeling position.
And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, oh, I know this stretch, but pay attention, because as you may have learned, we do a lot of things that are very similar to other people with some very, very, very specific small detail changes. So really listen up and don't fall into the bad habits of just doing the same hip flexor stretch you've always done.
That's an awesome point, John. We're gonna do rotation with this hip flexor stretch, and it's gonna surprise you how much it changes the way that the stretch pulls across the side of your body. So,
because although this is still like a hip flexor stretch, we can still utilize this to stretch so many other things. It's just a really bad name. It's just a half kneeling stretch.
Half kneeling stretch, I like that. So, we come into this half kneeling position, and the most important thing here is that I'm not gonna extend my lumbar spine. Do you see that? The pelvis rocked forward and the curve in my low back got more extreme. It's gonna be almost impossible to stretch my hip flexors from this position because they run actually from this part of the spine all the way down to the front of the hip. So in order to lengthen those groups of muscles, I have to posteriorly rock the pelvis, or if you were to imagine suspenders on the front of your pants, it's like you're pulling the suspenders up so that you're truly extending from the hip.
One thing we want to do is you want to think about getting tall and long, not just poking out through there, right? Because if this is attaching from here and running down here, we want to separate these 2 points, and simply just rocking through that low back is not going to do it. Trying to get nice and long with that good hip extension and vertical spinal posture is how you're going to do that.
Exactly, John. So, keeping all of that in place, you're going to take the opposite arm to the leg you have in front. You're going to bring it out in front of you, and as you let the hips come forward a little bit, it doesn't have to be a ton, right? Just a little bit with the hips. You're going to rotate your body towards the forward leg.
And one thing to notice here is Lily's breathing and bracing, so she really doesn't have her ribs end about there. She's really not rotating much through her lumbar spine. You're not going to get none, but you really want to get as little as possible. You want that rotation coming from here, that thoracic spine, just like Lily has here.
And it emphasizes the stretch all through the front of the hip so well. And I was a yoga teacher for 10 years, and I saw so many people go into these really deep lunges where they're like, yeah, I'm getting such good stretch. But look at my low back. If you don't have integrity in your body, you're not actually stretching what you want to be stretching. You're stressing your ligaments and hanging on passive structures that change shape when you spend too much time there, and then you don't have the support that you need later. If that explains to you and you're a yogi, you're in the right spot.
And one thing that Lily's not saying is she's not saying that if someone told you to get in that position that they're a bad person or that's a bad thing. That really all she's saying is that's just something that's totally different than what we're talking about here, despite the fact that it looks pretty similar.
Exactly. So it's going to be even a little bit easier to see when I do it facing the front. Well, let's do it the other way so I don't walk around in circles, right? So.
That's a joke. If you do 2 reps the same way and then none the other way, you won't actually walk around in a circle.
You won't. It's true. You can, if you know one side is tighter than the other, you can do more on one side than the other, right? And bring more balance into your body. So, not moving from the lumbars, which requires me to breathe 360 degrees into the torso, into the pelvic floor. It looks like this. Look at how my belly literally went out over the waistband, right? You're gonna keep that pressure out. The opposite arm comes out in front of you. You're letting the hips go forward just enough that you start to feel a stretch in the front of that hip, but not so far that you lose the integrity of your low back. And then you're just gonna rotate towards that forward leg. Oh, and it emphasizes the stretch in the front of the hip, pulling on that fascial plane so well. I love this one.
And play around with it. If it feels really good to go over and a little bit down or over and a little bit up, that's fine. If you go too much to straight, like 45 or straight up, we're kind of venturing into like a different exercise. But a little bit of individual variation to figure out what works best for you and where you're at that day based off what you've been doing recently is totally fine and totally within the realm of what we're saying is adequately okay by the rules to do.
Enjoy this actually great hip flexor stretch.
And side stretch.
And side stretch.